All praise be to Allah. I praise Him alone. I seek His forgiveness. He who God guides, no one can lead astray. I testify that there is no one worthy of being worshipped but God, and that Muhammad is the messenger of God. The topic today will be a further discussion of the concept of worship, because the word of Islam, as we briefly mentioned last time, means there is no one worthy of being worshipped but God, and that Muhammad is the messenger of God. And both those statements need to understand the meaning of worship. The worship has three pillars, and not one like a lot of people think, or two as some people think, but has three pillars. For every statement or belief or action to be considered a worship, it has to contain all three pillars of worship. The first and utmost of those pillars is the love of God. Of course, love varies. There is something which is natural love, which is not worship, like loving your children, loving your mother, loving your parent, loving a friend, and so on. But when we associate love with worship, we mean that kind of love in which results in submission to the one who you love. Total submission, total obedience, that you think that the one who you love needs to be or must be obeyed and surrendered to. This is the kind of love which we are speaking about. Therefore, in Islam, if you love any person or anything, this kind of love which leads to total submission and obedience, then you are worshipping him. Not all the people understand this kind of worship, but this is the worship that is the first and utmost obligation in Islam, and as some of our scholars put it, it is the foundation of Islam. The foundation of Islam is to love God. But loving God is only one pillar of worship in Islam. We have two other pillars that must accompany loving God. The first is to desire His mercy, God's mercy, and to desire His reward, and to desire His paradise. This is one of the pillars of worship in Islam. And for someone to say, I don't worship God because I want anything from Him, I only want His love, this is a false statement. This is a completely false statement in Islam. That's why God has made His mercy desirable to us in Quran. He has mentioned so much about His mercy so that we seek it. And that's why God has described paradise to us in Islam. In Quran, there are so many verses describing in a lot of detail paradise and what the people of paradise will be in, will be dwelling in. Also, we have in the traditions of our messenger hundreds of statements by the Prophet, peace of God be upon him, and may his mentioning be elevated with God. Prophet Muhammad has described paradise to us in detail in so many statements. Why? So that we desire it, and so that we ask God to make us amongst the people of paradise. And the third pillar is the fear of the wrath of God and the punishment of God, to fear His anger and to fear His punishment. This is also another pillar of worship in Islam. And without it, you will not be worshipping God. If you claim that you do something like prayers, for example, just to gain God's love and God's mercy and paradise and reward, without fearing God's wrath and punishment if you miss that worship, or if you deliberately don't do that worship, then you are not worshipping. All those three pillars must be there. God's love, God's mercy and reward, God's wrath and punishment. So, for someone to say God is all-loving, period, this is completely false. That's why in Quran, wherever God mentions His mercy, or in many verses actually, not everywhere, but in many verses, when He mentions His mercy and reward, He immediately mentions His punishment, His severe punishment. Why? So that there will be a balance between desiring God's mercy and loving God and seeking the love of God and fearing His wrath and punishment. With those two wings, you can fly. You cannot fly with one of them. That's why in Islam it is necessary to always keep in mind the relation between desire and fear. And this is mentioned clearly in the first chapter of Quran. And this chapter we recite it in every unit of our 5 daily prayers. So we recite it at least 17 times a day. And we started by mentioning the sentence regarding reminding us the love of Allah, the love of God. Then the sentence reminding us of His mercy and reward. Then the statement reminding us of His wrath and punishment. And then after that we say, it is only you whom we worship, and it is only you whom we seek all the support from. So worship came after its 3 pillars, and that is exactly the right place. And by stating this in every unit shows the importance of this. And it is a reminder, a constant reminder for us about the meaning of worship and the pillars of worship. And that we must always remember that if we want our actions and our statements to be considered worships, then they must contain all those 3 pillars. Then, when we say worship, or when we say it is you, God, whom we worship only, this is constantly reminded in Quran. This is Quran constantly reminds us with this. The first action which is mentioned in Quran is this statement. This is the beginning of the Quran, chapter called the opening of Quran. And the first order in Quran, if you go to Quran itself and open the pages, the first order you will find in the 2nd chapter of Quran, in verse 25 or 26. The first action which is mentioned is or the first order is يا أيها الناس اعبدوا ربكم. O people, you must single out God with all worship. O people, you must worship God alone. Of course, the verse says اعبدوا ربكم, worship your Lord, meaning alone. No association of worship with with God. You cannot worship anyone besides God, as we mentioned last time, and as the statement of Islam means. There is no one worthy of being worshipped but God. So the first verb which is mentioned in Quran, the first action, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ. It is only you whom we seek. It is only you whom we worship. And the first order in Quran is in the chapter next to this chapter, and that is in verse 25 or 6, which says, worship your God only. Meaning, don't worship others besides Him. It doesn't mean that in all your life you cannot do anything but worship. No, this is not the religion of Islam. The religion of Islam is not the religion of, for example, monks who seclude themselves in the church and don't do anything else. This is not Islam. As a matter of fact, Islam denied this. And God says in Quran, وَرَهْبَانِيَّةً ابْتَدَعُوهَا. This kind of attitude to seclude yourself from life altogether in a certain position or in a certain place is an extreme. And Islam does not encourage any kind of extremity. Any kind of extremity is denied in Islam. We don't accept extremes. Our Prophet said, those who go to extremes, their fate is doomed to be destruction. هلك المتنطعون, هلك المتنطعون, هلك المتنطعون. He said it 3 times. Indeed, those who seek the way of extremity are doomed to be destroyed. And then he repeated it 3 times to show that Islam is against extremity, against extremism. And he said in the other statement that the religion of Islam is easiness. And when he sent 2 of his companions to propagate Islam, he said, يَسِّرَا وَلَا تُعَسِّرَا, بَشِّرَا وَلَا تُنَفِّرَا. When you go and call others to Islam, make things easy for them. Do not make things difficult. And give good news, give glad tidings, give good news, and don't make people desperate of this religion or hate this religion. So this is the soul of the religion of Islam. And God said to our Prophet Muhammad, regarding our Prophet, He said, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. O Muhammad, we have only sent you as a mercy for all worlds. Al-Alameen means all the worlds. So this is regarding the pillars of worship in Islam. And nowadays, you see, for example, Christians who only speak about the love of God. And the devil have led them astray because of this, because they don't have the other 2 pillars, the desire in God's mercy and the paradise, or the fear of His wrath and punishment. As a matter of fact, it is rare that you find a Christian who knows any details about paradise, about hell, unlike the Muslims. As I mentioned earlier, we have great detail in Quran and more so in the sayings of our Prophet. Then, when we come to worship, we know that this action is a worship or not from the Quran itself and from the sayings of our Prophet. Everything is mentioned. For example, loving God. God says in Quran that there are some people who make associates with God in their love. And he said, the believers in God, the faithful in God, love God alone. So this is a proof that loving God is a worship. And if you love other than God to the degree that you resemble his love to the love of God himself, then you are worshipping him besides God. If you love a person to the degree that you consider everything that he tells you is true and is absolute truth, unnegotiable, then you are worshipping him with God. There is no such thing in Islam. It is only the messengers who speak the truth, but because they have been revealed to by God, and because if they say something which is not exactly appropriate, they will be corrected by God. But other than the messengers of God, there is no guarantee for anyone. There is no more revelation after Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is no guarantee that you will be corrected. Therefore, to submit to someone, then you are worshipping him. And if you love some person to the degree that you fear him like fearing God himself, then again you are worshipping this person. If you worship, if you fear a person, a human being, that he owns to to make you sick or something like that, then you are treating him and worshipping him like worshipping God. Fear is a worship in Islam if it reaches that level. But the natural fear is not worship. You fear a snake opening its mouth. You fear a lion in front of you opening its mouth. This is natural. Okay, but when you fear something or some individual and something which only God can harm you, then you are worshipping him with God. And if you desire something from some person in the way that no one should be desired from except God, like desiring entering paradise, if you desire it from someone else other than God, then you are desiring from him what no one owns but God. And this is worshipping him. If you think that you will only go to paradise if such and such person allows it for you, then you are worshipping him like God, because you have given him the right of God. This is the right of God only. And unfortunately, we have this happen even amongst the so-called Muslims nowadays, because of the false thoughts that have been passed on to them from either non-Muslims or from the whispers of the devil, because the devil is our first enemy and he continues to be our enemy until the day of judgment. And he constantly whispers things to you. He might start with small things so that it will be easier for him to reach his plot. He starts, that's why God says in Quran, do not follow the steps of the devil. Because the devil don't come to you at one step. Except if he knows you are so weak and so ignorant that you can accept it. Then he, of course, he doesn't waste his time. He gives it to you right away. But if you have, let's say, strong faith in God, true faith in God, he comes to you sneaking. Okay, he starts with something small and build up on it until he reaches his goal and exceeds his goal to more and more and more and more confusion and more falsehood until he put you in the midst of an ocean of false thoughts and false beliefs that you probably couldn't ever get out of. So therefore, the fear of worship is only for God, and the desire of worship is only for God, and the love of worship is only for God. Love has many ranks. Natural love, as I mentioned, and then the final one is the worship love. There are ranks in between. To love something which is a sin, to love it not because you think it is the right thing, you know it is the wrong thing, but you love it for some temporary joy. This is not considered going out of Islam, but it's considered a sin. This kind of love is a sin. You know that stealing is forbidden in Islam. Your duty is to hate this and to consider it unbeneficial. If you consider it unbeneficial, but you still do it for some worldly gain, temporary gain, then you are sinning in Islam. This is a sin. It does not take you out of Islam, but you are a sinner. Therefore, if someone says, if I become a Muslim, am I expected to be perfect? The answer, not necessarily. Not necessarily. You can be a Muslim, but a weak Muslim. And you can be a Muslim, but a strong Muslim. And you can come out of Islam if you reach the degree of hating the legislation itself and considering it useless or backwardness or this or that. If you deal with anything in Islam that you know it is from Islam, you deal with it in that way that you consider it worthless or unuseful or backward, then you are not a Muslim. So this is regarding the pillars of worship and the meaning of worship. As I mentioned, the meaning or the worships themselves are defined in the Book of God and what the Prophet said. Prayers, for example, there are verses in Quran which shows that prayers is great worship. Supplication, there are verses in Quran showing that it is a worship. Sacrifice of animals for becoming closer to God. This is a worship. So if you come to a certain individual and you sacrifice an animal for him because you fear that if you don't do it, he will be angry with you and take you to hellfire, you are worshipping him. Even though it's an action. It's not a belief. But an action could not be separated from a belief. There is no action which is separated from a belief. So you are considered as someone who is directing the worship of sacrifice to other than God, and therefore you are out of Islam. Because here you are making this worship on the basis of fearing other than God, like fearing God. And similarly, if you make this worship on the basis of desiring from other than God what cannot be desired except from God, and so on. Trusting God, this is a great worship in Islam. This is the greatest worship in Islam. Why? Because trusting God includes loving Him, and includes fearing Him, and includes desiring His mercy and reward. It includes all the three pillars of worship, and it includes a lot of the actions of the heart. And therefore, trusting God truly is a great worship of God. And putting this same trust that should be only for God, putting it for someone else, no matter who he is, you are worshipping him then besides God, and you are coming out of Islam. And also we have, for example, pilgrimage is a great worship. We have parts of those of the pilgrimage, like going around the Kaaba. This is a worship of God. When you go around the Kaaba, you are remembering God and you are obeying His order. It has nothing to do with the Kaaba itself. You are not worshipping the Kaaba. No. When you go around the Kaaba, you are doing the worship the way that God has ordered you to do. So that's why Muslims who know the religion of Islam truly don't rub the Kaaba itself or do something like that, because they know that this is not a part of this great worship. They only go around it remembering God, glorifying Him, mentioning His names and attributes, supplicating to Him. That's all they do. So this is a worship here. So if you find someone going around the grave as if he is going around the Kaaba, then he is worshipping others besides God. And he is not a Muslim. Even though he is claiming to be a Muslim, he is not a Muslim, because he is directing a worship to other than God. And similarly, if you find someone sacrificing an animal at the site of this grave, again, as I mentioned earlier, this is a worship. So he is directing the worship to other than God. And those actions, whether the actions of the heart or the actions of the limbs, that constitute a worship, are such actions which are ordered by God and His Messenger. We cannot make our own actions of worship. That's why our Prophet says, every innovation is a deviation. Meaning innovation in religion, not innovation in worldly things. Worldly things, go ahead, innovate. Do whatever is useful. Refrigerator, rocket, whatever. Go ahead. If it's useful, go ahead. If you want to use it for good, go ahead. But in religion, there is no room for innovation. And this is the meaning of the second part of our testification of the word of Islam, that Muhammad is the messenger of God, meaning there is no way to reach God and to obey Him and to do that which He likes or say what He likes, except by following the messenger. And this is why Jesus was telling His people, I am the way, because He was the way for his people. He was the way for His people. Anyone who was in that place where Jesus was sent, and Jesus was sent to him, like the children of Israel, if they considered what Jesus ordered them not to be true, then they would be denials of faith, and they would deserve hellfire forever. Similarly, all other messengers before, every messenger was sent to a certain nation. In some places, in some times, there was more than a prophet. For example, there was Prophet Moses and another prophet, Al-Khadr, in his time. Al-Khadr was not ordered to follow Musa, and Musa was not ordered to follow Al-Khadr. He has his own legislation and he has his own. When we say his own, we don't mean that everything is contradictory here and there or everything is different. No. What we mean by this is that sometimes Al-Khadr would legalize something that Musa would consider to be strange. Why? Because he doesn't know regarding this particular issue, he doesn't know the details given by God to Al-Khadr. He doesn't know that. And as soon as this knowledge is revealed to Musa, he would immediately say, oh yeah, now I know why. And now this is in conformity with what I have. Okay? For example, Moses saw Al-Khadr do some action which looked bad to him. So he was amazed and he said, why are you doing this? Then later on, when Al-Khadr explained to him why, he got relieved. Musa got relieved and he said, yes, now I know. So you have this kind of knowledge and I don't have it. So the worship of God must be known by the orders of the messenger. And whatever in Quran and whatever in the sayings of the Prophet. And whatever we make up our own is not accepted. That's why in Islam, in Quran, it says that when the Christians created the action of monkhood, being totally isolated in a church and not marrying women and all this, God says, وَرَهْبَانِيَّةً ابْتَدَعُوهَا, this kind of seclusion and monkhood that they have innovated. Okay? So God did not approve of them. He said, this is an innovation. I did not order them. Because God is merciful. And He doesn't order humans with something which is so difficult that they cannot bear. أقول